We're reading in Book 1, Canto 4, The Secret Knowledge. We've come to page 63 at the break. After having been introduced to Savitri in the first couple of cantos, we were introduced to her father, King Aswapati, in the third canto. And it was he, kind of the forerunner of humanity and its aspiration towards the divine, that attained a conscious awareness of the Divine Mother and implored her to come down on earth and be born. And she agreed and was born as his daughter, Savitri. So in Canto 3, we were taken through the beginnings of King Aswapati's sadhana and yoga, more especially his spiritual realization. And we saw that his spiritual realization was an integral one. It was one of realizing both the spirit, transcendent of the universe, but also the dynamic aspect of the divine, which we refer to as the Divine Mother. This dynamic aspect which is behind all the energies of the universe, behind all beings, behind all the manifestation. It is she who creates all of that and is embodied, in a sense, in it, in those energies. So he has this realization, and now in Canto 4, The Secret Knowledge, the author, Sri Aurobindo, kind of takes a break from explaining Aswapati's sadhana and yoga and gives us a more detailed look at his realization up until this point. So that's the secret knowledge that he has achieved, has gained. And what's emphasized throughout the canto is this dynamic aspect of both the transcendent spirit and the dynamic energy behind all things. And in the earlier part of the canto, he shows to us that even in our kind of ordinary, everyday lives, which is a manifestation of this energy on a lower scale, we also within us have parts of our being that can transcend this earthly life and unite with the divine, both in its passive spirit side and in its dynamic, conscious dynamic energy side. But that takes kind of an inward turn of our being. It's a knowledge that's hidden from our normal surface everyday consciousness. And we have to really turn deep within in order to realize that knowledge. Now he is, in this next part that we're about to read, will be describing these two aspects, but in the sense of, in the terms of the spirit and conscious nature. And he says these two aspects are ultimately one. But together, their workings create all this that we see. So let's begin reading. Suresh, would you like to read?
617.
Yeah, at the break on page 63, starting at the break.
This is the knot that ties together the stars. The two who are one are the secret of all power. The two who are one are the might and right in things. His soul, silent, supports the world and her. His acts are her commandments' registers. Happy, inert, he lies beneath her feet. His breast he offers for her cosmic dance, of which our lives are the quivering theater. And none could bear but for his strength within. Yet none would leave because of his delights. His works, his thoughts have been devised by her. His being is a mirror vast of hers. Active, inspired by her, he speaks and moves. His deeds obey her heart's unspoken demands. Passive, he bears the impacts of the world as if her touches shaping his soul and life. His journey through the days is her sun march. He runs upon her roads. Hers is his course. A witness and student of her joy and dole, a partner in her evil and her good. He has consented to her passionate ways. He is driven by her sweet and dreadful pulse.
Thank you. Let's pause. So the secret spirit behind, supporting, and the active nature. Together, these create all that we see. His soul, This is the spirit which is supporting the manifestation, is silent, supporting the world and her, nature. His acts are her commandments registers. Register is like an official record or an entry in a register. So his actions are registers of her commandments. She determines. She is the energy. Happy, inert, he lies beneath her feet. He's a supporting presence. His breast he offers for her cosmic dance.
For me, it's a question now, especially in his soul silent supports the world and her. And then his acts are your commandments registered. What does it mean to our life, to us? This key holds. What do you think about this?
Our actions are also nature's. It's nature's energy that is working within us, which is carrying out all of our activities, all of our thoughts, all our feelings. It's all nature. She is determining that. We, or that, let's say, that conscious soul or spirit behind, is observing all of this, is conscious of this happening, but the actions themselves are taking place by nature.
Yeah, but to say that an act is a record seems a bit strange to me.
Right?
Sorry?
An act is a record?
Yeah. It's like a defining mark or action of that force.
To be is not the happy. How is it again? What is it you do not understand?
For me, an action is not a record. An action is an action, and a record is a record. They are not the same.
But he's kind of referring to the idea that the acts that we perform are just an outcome of her force.
Yes. And then when we consider on a higher level where everything that's happening has already happened in a higher realm of consciousness, that we are just the projections of that. So it's already there, it's already predestined, but in our realm, it's still based on space and time, no? So we feel that what is happening here is based on space and time.
Yeah, elsewhere earlier in the Canto, he talked about like these this consonant surrounded by two open vowels. This infinity behind, we don't see. We only see the action on the surface. All that's behind that action, we're not really aware of.
It's veiled, no?
Yeah.
Yes. Which is quite good, actually. If we already knew everything here, then what's the point of being here? So there's the self-limitation of the play, no? So it's like, and like what Margaret is saying, no? The transcendent, the universal, and the individual. It's the microcosm and the microcosm. Everything is happening in the bigger field and the individual as well. So we are, the whole universe is within us. and the transcendent itself as well.
This cosmic dance, maybe somebody with better knowledge of the Indian traditions could explain, but there is the dance of Shiva.
Yes.
Yeah. And he's dancing.
Because Kali is the time, she changes time, destruction and creation. And she's, her force is contained only by Shiva, only Shiva can come and control, so she needs the support of her extremely impulsive force is supported, calmed down only by Shiva, so he offers his prayers. It's kind of an image that's there.
In Hong Kong, we call it yin yang. No, the yin yang, the dance.
So further down, he kind of elaborates on this idea that his works, his thoughts have been devised by her, by nature. His being is a mirror vast of hers. He's like just this kind of consciousness behind supporting, watching, but all the action is taking place through her force. Active, inspired by her, he speaks and moves. His deeds obey her heart's unspoken demands. Passive, he bears the impacts of the world as if her touches shaping his soul and life. He has surrendered to her, to nature. He remains passive. He lets her control the unrolling of the world, of the evolution, and he just takes part, watches, feels her forces shaping him, his development through the many lives.
But also I think it's a very interesting two points and poles that his strength within and his delight, how we as human beings living here, we are playing the theater and we only can bear it because of the strength which we get. And we cannot leave because there's a delight in it, behind it. So I think that is quite an interesting aspect also for me in a new understanding of spirituality. It was before the refined and the go out and all this, but here there's two poles, the strength and the delight.
So those are aspects of that supporting spirit. The Satchidananda, that Ananda is there supporting. Also, the strength is the Chittapas, it's the consciousness force.
Chit Shakti.
And the verse 625, and none could bear, but for his strength within.
For
None
his,
could bear what? Right?
The force.
the difficulties of life.
Yeah, but it's not.
Yeah, 65. I think there's also a saying that when we face difficulties, we get also from the Supreme the force to handle it. Otherwise, it would not come to us in this way.
Yeah, as he puts it, he bears the impacts of the world as if her touches, shaping his soul and life. Through all those difficulties, his soul is developing. Our individual soul, our individual psychic being is taking shape.
I think it's just the strength of the Purusha, it's the one which holds the Prakriti, the outer nature, and all our energy is the same things. It is contained only with that strength. Even when it's concealed and it's not conscious, it is still everything that happens outwardly is because of this Purusha's calm oneness.
This Purusha Prakriti is kind of about Krishna Prakriti.
Yes.
And both cannot be without the other, no? So that's why we said the two who are one, no?
He is a witness and student of her joy and dole. Dole is grief and sorrow.
But the next one is quite good, no?
A partner. A
Because
partner.
many people are going into the polarities saying that, oh, that one is evil, I don't like that. But actually, it's part of the play, no?
Partner in her evil and good. He has consented. The soul consents to all this play of nature. Our soul consents. We haven't, it's not imposed in a sense. Also, that soul consents to all of these things.
So, but not everyone is consenting.
Our soul is consenting.
Yes.
On the surface, we may not consent.
Exactly. This is the funny part.
It's consenting until it's not conscious. Yeah. And that's the whole point. When it becomes conscious, then it becomes.
Yes, and
then so this play of nature is on.
yes, exactly.
On the surface, it's like the next line, he is driven by her sweet and dreadful force. That's how it feels more to us normally.
Either sweet or dreadful.
Mother say, I don't remember exactly, but mother has to where she said, he is, and now I couldn't, and she couldn't be materialized because me and you, mother said something about Auroville and her.
Yeah, they don't exist without each
Yeah,
other.
Yeah.
I don't mean it.
Because
These two lines is all this. Yeah.
So I think he just said that the whole work of Sri Aurobindo could not be materialized or executed without the divine intervention of Mother.
Without me and me, I couldn't.
Without me, he is unmanifest. Yeah, without
me, he is. Yeah, exactly.
he does not exist. Right?
Yes, correct.
It's two lines. Yeah, he's not existing.
Yes.
Without him, I exist not. Without me, he is unmanifest.
Yeah.
That's why it's always said the two who are one.
Yeah.
He was always, for me, it's always interesting. What does it mean for me? Okay, it doesn't align.
Tinika?
His sanctioning name initials all her words. His silence is his signature to her deeds. In the execution of her drama scheme, in her fancies of the moment and its mood, in the march of his obvious ordinary world, where all is deep and strange to the eyes that see. and nature's common forms are marveled wefts. She, through his witness sight and motion of might, unrolls the material of her cosmic act, her happenings that exalt and smite the soul, her force that moves, her powers that save and slay, her word that in the silence speaks to our hearts, her silence that transcends the summit word, her heights and depth to which our spirit moves, her events that weave the texture of our lives, and all by which we find or lose ourselves. Things sweet and bitter, magnificent and mean, things terrible and beautiful and divine.
Thank you. Again, he is stating that the soul consents to all this play of nature. His silence is his signature to her deeds. He allows this to happen. He could stop, he could say no, but he allows the play of nature. So she unrolls this long drama. In the execution of her drama's scheme, in her fancies of the moment and its mood, in the march of this obvious, ordinary world, where all is deep and strange to the eyes that see. Again, all of this takes place, all these activities of the nature in our lives. We don't see what's all behind that, supporting that, moving, those energies that are moving, even the beings that are acting, speaking through us, moving us, all of that we don't see. So that's how he's saying, where all is deep and strange to the eyes that see. If we could see all of that behind. Otherwise it just seems quite ordinary. In nature's common forms are marvel wefts. Well, even the simple forms of nature, actually they're quite intricate, complex things. We don't see. A weft is like a weaving from something woven together.
A web, something like that. Intertwined.
Yeah, like weaving, the needle goes.
Oh, but now in quantum physics, we already know all of this. There's a lot of people who already know.
And just anything you put under the microscope and
Or not just a microscope, we have electron microscope.
Yeah.
We have the particle collider, no? So we already understand what is happening underneath this all. No?
Yeah, one of the interesting things is, I mean, we think we're just a unique being, but I mean, we're composed of all these living organisms and cells and all these things that
The
are,
atoms, they never stop moving. No? It's fantastic. It's really a marvel, no?
No, she also says in one of his poems, too, where you can just see he takes all his cunning to fashion a curve in the hair.
And when,
Actually, when I saw the verse 617, this is the knots that ties together the stars. I thought if you tell that to the scientists who speak about the Big Bang, the Big Bang is the knot that ties together the stars. The two in one. I wonder how they would react.
It's interesting because
well, they don't recognize the soul because it's silent, invisible. You can't put it under the microscope and see it.
Yes.
yeah, but Einstein speaks about it like a spooky movement in the distance, no? So they
Well, Einstein had some intuition about something else.
well, many of the quantum physicists now have a lot of intuition about it. Because when did Shira Aurobindo write this?
I don't know.
1950, no?
Well, before.
Yeah, so now there's a lot of already a lot of happenings that has happened on Earth. So what the mystics have been saying, many have already confirmed it, even in our sciences. So we cannot just say that we don't know because a lot already know, no?
No, they know, but they will not accept it because they still go by reason. Like even in quantum physics, they know there is a particle. They see the wave, sometimes they see it as wave, sometimes they see it as particle. And we know it's Chit and Shakti, we know it's consciousness and force, but they can't explain why. They know all these things,
But how many scientists have you
it's
talked to?
always, unless you take a leap of faith that this exists beyond mind. Yeah, I think Shobhito has probably mentioned science and spirituality will probably meet at a much later stage.
Oh, there's a lot of awakened scientists now. That's why I think I want to say that now time moves forward. It's already 2022. That's why I asked when Shira Aurobindo wrote this. Because many people have already awakened to it.
Yeah.
What you just said, even the mother said that in 1972, that in 50 years, this is in 20
Yes, now.
years now,
Exactly.
that Shira Aurobindo's consciousness force will, how you say, embrace and leave us all who are open from this,
Yes, correct.
from the mind and from the heart.
Yes.
When you have open heart, you can get
Yes, there is a change in there are many scientists who are now open, but there are also many who simply cannot accept that. For example, Robert Sheldrake and other scientists, they were not accepted in TED Talks. They are banned. Many scientists like Robert Sheldrake are simply banned. They cannot express. So the two happen.
Yes, we cannot expect everybody to awaken all at the same time. But there are more and more individuals who are awakening to the truth of things. No? So we have to put this in the equation. Otherwise, if we always say that no one is awakened, then how can you move forward? No? So you have to put in the equation those who are already awakened.
Science has created this big edifice, this big, view of existence. without God, without spirit. And it kind of also grew up as a reaction against religion. So it was able to explain many, many things without that. So they're very reluctant to bring it in, because then all of this kind of creation that they've made, or this view of creation, it would kind of crumble in a sense of, it wouldn't be true in there.
Yes, we say that's the conventional view of science. But now you have quantum mechanics, quantum physics, which, like we said, we
Yeah.
have the quantum, we have the particle collider in Switzerland, you know. And then if you even watch this documentary, which is the Stride 2, the unified field, then you can see all the new knowledge. You know?
Yeah, they've been chipping away at this
Yes,
for
yes.
some
So you
time.
have to put it in the right context. Otherwise, you cannot clump everything into ignorance.
One of the last things in the last few lines that is important is that he talks about this nature as encompassing, the very heights and the depths. Her silence that transcends the summit word, her heights and depths to which our spirit moves. I mean, she contains the very highest consciousness. She even embodies the Supreme Lord himself. I mean, she gives form to him. But at the same time, she gives forms to the lowest evil forces. Yes. That's why Sri Aurobindo says, turn to the mother, because she can give that realization of the spirit, of the silence, and she can give that as well as the dynamic aspects.
Yes, this is the secret, no? The sunlit path. Surrender.
Would you continue?
Her empire in the cosmos she has built. He is governed by her subtle and mighty laws. His consciousness is a babe upon her knees. His being, the field of her vast experiment. Her endless space is the playground of his thoughts. She binds to knowledge of the shapes of time and the creative error of limiting mind and chance that wears the rigid face of fate, and her sport of death and pain and nations. He is changed and struck in immortality. His soul is a subtle atom in a mass. His substance, the material for her works. His spirit survived amid the death of things. He climbs to eternity through being steps. He is carried by her from night to deathless light. This grand surrender is his free will's gift. His pure, transcendent force submits to hers.
Thank you. Let's pause.
I do not understand. She binds to knowledge of the shapes of time and the creator. I don't understand this.
Yeah,
The way to grow.
in this passage in particular, he's giving us many complexities of this relation between the two, between the soul and nature. And it's, I think, very difficult to really comprehend all of the nuances of this relation, but he gives quite a few different aspects of it here. And some of them he, kind of reiterates a number of times, and so they're like really kind of key or central. Others, he just kind of presents in passing.
But to bind means to bind like this, or to bind
She binds to knowledge of the shapes of time. So she's taking this infinity and she binds it up into shapes.
like this.
I think if you read the four lines together,
Mm.
then it says, she binds has changed and struggling in immortality. So she binds to knowledge of the shapes of time and the creative error of limiting mind, and chance that wears the rigid face of fate, and the sport of death and pain and nescience is changed and struggling immortality. So it's all there, it's given below.
So his infinity, his spirit, she is tying into little knots and little forms. She's limiting the infinite knowledge into a limiting mind. Our minds are very limited. We cut reality up into little bits that we piece together, and we say, okay, this explains it. You add this idea and this idea and this idea, you combine them this way, and then you can understand. But, it's very limited.
So she binds his change and struggling immortality
Hmm.
to knowledge of the shapes of time
Yeah.
and to the creative error of limited mind
Yeah.
and to chance. Yeah? To chance
Well, like
where-
this idea of chance, I think she binds, and chance
to change.
that wears the rigid face of fate. I mean, this line to me, it's kind of mysterious, but maybe, again, if nature is limiting things to a kind of a mental view, then we tend to explain things according to chance. I mean, chance is one of the, apparently, the foundations of science, right? We say this happened by chance. I mean,
based on ignorance, on not knowing, no? Chance. It's like if you don't know, it happened by chance.
Yeah,
Based on
I
ignorance.
understand the word, I don't understand the grammatical. I don't know.
yeah, it's quite subtle, I think.
And the rigid face of fate.
Yeah, this chance wearing this rigid face of fate. It's quite. It's chance. We say, science says, the universe, it just all has happened by chance because it's come out of the nescience, out of space, out of inert matter.
And then religion says,
And it just happened,
yes,
but but now all of a sudden, it obeys all of these particular laws.
Which is what religion says. It's like, oh, you're fated to be like that, you're fated to be like this. So the religion and science is there, no? So you can see.
They're both kind of mental constructs trying to explain what's actually a mystery.
Yeah, it's kind of like those lines that she was saying. They're kind of like taking the vastness of Purusha and making it on a relative plane.
Yeah.
That limits the vastness of that other way of seeing.
But it's not only it's nature that does this also. Nature is doing this. She kind of creates this apparent, universe in a way that everything seems solid, and then all of a sudden we find out it's not really solid.
So then the next, his soul is a settled atom in a mass.
A subtle atom, not a physical atom, maybe. He's there within all the forms as the spirit, the subtle. Within each atom, he's there as the subtle center of it, the spirit behind it.
Yeah, but mass implies something, not a force, no?
It implies a physical form.
Yes, it's the power behind something, no? Even if it's subtle, no? Yes, the weight, it has something, no? It's not nothing, it's something, it's a mass.
It's physicality, no?
E is equals to mc squared.
So he's the E, she's the M.
Or vice versa, you can.
Maybe to these two lines, and there comes this explanation for his strength within and his delight as an atom. His soul is a separate atom in a mass. So the strength and the delight maybe plays a role in this.
So his delight is like the soul, or the subtle atom. But then also this next line, it's quite mysterious. His substance, a material for her works. As if he is the substance, but I don't know.
The subtle substance.
Yeah, I mean,
yes.
his spirit survives amid the death of things. He climbs to eternity through being's gaps. He is...
His sentence that makes me think about, in the record of Yoga Show, Auroville speaks about many kinds of substances, each one with a particular power. And also there is the kosha. So the different kosha are all substances. And there are the physical kosha and many other koshas.
All subtle.
Yeah. So I think maybe you refer to that kind of also.
He climbs to eternity through being's gaps. I think it's the process of evolution from where soul, psychic being evolves from soul as spark evolves from each outward form and animal and bird and then human being, and then it's plantains, when it becomes conscious, not the physical layers of the subtle body.
But it leaves the body, right? Somehow
Or both.
that spirit.
As a man, yes. As a spark of the divine, it is just the evolution, process of evolution.
Although it's both, no? The material and the spirit itself, no? It's not just this way.
The subtle body, yes, it's both ways.
Both ways.
But the subtle body that we're talking about is only developed in man. I mean, to its extent for individuals and physicality.
That last line there, he is carried by her from night to deathless light. So she's carrying that soul within her forms, but he escapes from one life to the next. Yeah. Yeah, and the whole course, through the whole course of evolution.
Also this line, his spirit survives amid the death of things. And I often saw and showed this film Life After Life on Ryman movie. And there you can really experience how human beings left their body and their spirit, their consciousness has been living on, yeah, and acting on. And when they came back in the body, they took over the body again and with their consciousness.
Yeah, so there's many accounts from different people who've experienced that. No?
And what are the being's gaps?
Well, in a sense, I mean, we think of the physical form, and it's just these molecules and all of that. But that disintegrates and somehow the spirit escapes, right? It leaves. Where does it leave from? The gaps in the physical. Huh? There's something, within that physical, or the physical is not what we think it is. It's not one thing. It's composed of energies or something, and there are gaps. Yeah.
To me, it's also coming one experience of this gaps is silence. When you go in silence, maybe can touch reality.
Yeah.
That's one gap in our being, and stepping back.
Shall we continue? Who would like to read next? Would you read?
Where did we about this pure transcendence?
In the mystery?
Okay. In the mystery of her cosmic ignorance.
No, that's
Okay. In the mystery of her cosmic ignorance, in the insoluble riddle of her play, a creature made of perishable stuff. In the pattern she has set for him, he moves. He thinks with her thoughts, with her trouble his bosom heaves. He seems the thing that she would have him see. He is whatever her artist will can make. Although she drives him on her fancy's roads, at play with him as with her child or slave, to freedom and the eternal's mystery, and immortality's stand above the world. She moves her seeming puppet of an hour.
Let's pause there. It's just such an important passage. So these first lines, they're suggesting that kind of two aspects of this dynamic force. One, conscious. We talk of the Divine Mother as the conscious force behind nature. And then there is this cosmic ignorance. There is the lower nature, which is unaware. So here he talks about in the mystery of her cosmic ignorance, in the insoluble riddle of her play. So he's speaking of this kind of transcendent mother who creates this cosmos and creates this kind of illusion of ignorance. As if it's a play. But really, she has this infinite knowledge that she can create this with. It's an insoluble riddle in truth of what she's done here. We cannot really reason it out or fathom it with our minds. And
it's kind of like joyful in a way. I mean, like from her angle.
yeah.
You know, like she has, like they once described that picture of Vishnu with mother at the feet of Vishnu. That one picture. She's at his feet and she's appreciative at his feet because she can do what she wants to do, or something like that. He explained it that it was her appreciation at his feet because she's you know, and that kind of rings out in this that it's kind of like the joy of her authority of doing, or something like that. You know, it's subtle.
The delight.
Yeah, kind of a delight from her angle.
Otherwise, how can you even laugh at it? No?
Yeah.
If you're too serious, it's like life becomes a bore.
So the soul takes birth here in this cosmic ignorance, takes birth as a creature made of perishable stuff, and she creates these patterns, and he moves in those patterns. He thinks with her thoughts, with her trouble, his bosom heaves. He seems the thing that she would have him seem. He is whatever her artist will can make. Yeah, she creates this Saul like an artist, making a painting. And although she drives him on her fancy's roads, at play with him, as with her child or slave, to freedom and the eternal's mastery and immortality stand above the world, she moves her seeming puppet of an hour. It's so profound. I mean,
It's not the play of words of Shira Rubindo. It's so fantastic.
Yeah.
You're a slave, but you have to freedom. You're not stuck to being a slave. No?
And it's not a random game. There's kind of a...
It seems, that's why it says, he seems the thing that she would have him seem.
I think one can experience this also in all life, or I experience it often, when I sort things out which should happen, and then comes something else, an energy or a guidance to do something else, and that was perfect to me.
Yes.
So I think everyone experiences
The grace.
to be a puppet there.
that things are progressing in a certain direction towards greater mastery, towards greater freedom, knowledge.
And then can one see it was much better, much better when it came out.
I don't understand.
Yeah.
Want this, what we want. Thank you. Yes.
Shall we continue? Would you like to read? Would you like to read? Even in his mortal session.
Even in this mortal session in body's house, and nameless traveler between birth and death. Ephemeral, dreaming of immortality, when she throws him, it takes up her pause. It has harnessed her to the yoke of her own law. His face of human thought puts on a crown, held in her knee, bound to a great caprice. He studies her ways, if so he may prevail, even for an hour, and she works out his will. He makes of her his moment, passion, serve, to obey she trains, she follows her creature's will. For him she was made, lives only for his use, but following her, then is he most a slave. He is a dependent on his needs and hers. Nothing without her he can. She is instead.
Thank you. Let's pause. Here he calls our life, our mortal life, even in his mortal session in body's house. Referring to.
That he is taking his mortal session.
It's kind of just one installment, huh? One session.
One life.
Yeah. an aimless traveler between birth and death. We saw that it wasn't completely aimless. She has her plan, but to us it may seem that way. Ephemeral, dreaming of immortality. We understand we're passing creatures, but we still dream of immortality and long for it, aspire for it. And to reign, she spurs him. Nature encourages this attempts at mastery.
It is an interesting description of the play together.
Yes.
That his mortal session in the body's out, and that dreaming of immortality, to reign his person, elation.
And then he takes up her powers. So now in the human being, in the human mind, we analyze nature's powers and begin to use them, try to master them for our own purposes. Like
intellect, like these
steam, like atomic energy. All the things that science is doing, it's trying to master these nature's energies, put them at our own service. Understand even the laws of mind, the emotions, so that we can better master all of these things, our own lives. He takes up her powers. He begins to utilize these forces. He has harnessed her to the yoke of her own law. She has certain laws that she follows. Now he's utilizing, understanding those laws, and utilizing her, mastering her energies.
Yeah, I see it like, like the psychic, it's above these other powers. So it can harness and become a master, sort of like here, if you're coming from that angle. You know what I mean? Because that's like the king, and then you can harness the other powers here. It says to her own law. But maybe it's because he's approaching from the psychic.
Yeah, that's where you get a truer mastery from the psychic. But the mind has a certain limited ability and control also. And there is a soul behind the mind as well. There is this mental Purusha. So there is a being kind of behind that, working at that mental level. But he is kind of more referring to this mental level here, because he says his face of human thought puts on a crown.
Oh yes, that's very specific, no? Human thought.
But he's not completely free. He's not completely master. He's still in her hold, as he says here, held in her leash, bound by her veiled caprice. He studies her ways, if so he may prevail, even for an hour, and she work out his will. So he's working, he's trying to master her. He makes of her his moment passion's servant. And to obey she feigns. She makes believe, okay, I'll follow you. She follows her creature's lead. He's still her creature. She's created him. Because for him she was made, lives only for his use. So that's that beautiful dance or relation between the two. But conquering her, then is he most her slave. He is her dependent. All his means are hers. He has no energies that are not hers. Nothing without her he can. She rules him still.
I think these lines are so interesting for our daily life to become more conscious what is happening here all around us and in so many levels and tones and rhythms. It is triggering our mind what is happening here. I'm very grateful to go more in detail for all this.
Yeah, he's suggesting that this whole mental level of our life is important and necessary to try to understand the laws of nature, to try to master nature, to master our own lives. All of these things we should do. Ultimately, we can't, somehow do it with our mental will. But it's a stepping stone along the way.
For a wider, deeper understanding what's going on.
But this is a good indication of who to surrender to, who has the supreme power. That's why Shira Auroville wrote this small book, The Mother.
Yeah.
And he says that surrender to the Mother. That's the whole idea. No? So once you get that surrender to the Mother, you're with the big boss. Your problems will disappear. More or less.
She has all the forces, and she's leading the soul towards that realization, to that unity with her.
With her, yes. Exactly.
The two who are one. Right? So when they join, then that is the secret of all knowledge and power. Are you having any music now, or is it working?
I don't think so.
Oh.
No, there's a little bit of a problem, so we can't play the music.
Okay.
This was already 11:42.
Perhaps I think we will stop at this point. Yeah, let's. But then he's going to kind of, I think, open up a new idea. Would you like to continue, or?
Or just
to give this and the next line. At last he wakes through memory of self. And that is where all these processes are going.
Yeah, he's leading us towards this realization of the self of the deity, of the Godhead behind. So that's where it's headed.
Yeah, like said that it's yin and yang is knowledge, like good knowledge.
And we use the remaining time for a short satsang. If anyone has any question, then maybe we can do a satsang because a satsang is very important, no? Otherwise, what is the point of being together if you cannot
Future of
enter
Indian
into
Savitri. We are together to reach our Indian Savitri. For I come from that is fantastic. Yeah, we shouldn't lose that.
Maybe we can just read quietly without
I think we had quite a few questions.
We had quite a bit of give and take, I think, today.
I think there's a lot of some discussion in between also. You just simply read the mantra.
Maybe we can just have now a short silent
yes,
meditation for a few minutes and then.
Communicate with them.
yes.
Thanks to Sri Aurobindo.